All right, in this lesson, we're looking at photosynthesis. Here are our dot points. There are quite a few of them, and it's quite a broad range. It's not just, hey, what does photosynthesis produce? There's quite a lot of information in there, so please take the time to go and read them. All right, photosynthesis is the production of carbon compounds in cells using light energy. So it sounds nice and simple, and really what we're aiming to do is produce that the glucose, and that's what our main topic there is. However, we're talking about carbon compounds, and the ones we've already discussed, mainly we're talking carbs here, but we've also talked about lipids and proteins. So organisms are autotrophs. If they are photosynthetic, it means they can create their own carbon requirements using light energy and other simple organic molecules. The energy conversion is about taking light energy and turning it into chemical energy, and we often use that chemical energy when we eat vegetables or plants of any kind. So photosynthesis, here is your balanced chemical equation. We've got carbon dioxide as our substrate there and our water, and in the presence of light energy and chlorophyll, we are able to produce glucose, oxygen and water. So it is sort of the reverse of cellular respiration, but is a lot more complicated than that. So some historical significance. Prior to photosynthetic organisms being available, there's no oxygen in the atmosphere, okay, or very, very tiny, almost trace amounts. Oxygen's previously been able to capture and stored in other ways, so it might be dissolved in water or the oceans or something like that. However, photosynthesis is the most significant natural source of oxygen gas, right, the actual gas of it. If we think back to topic 1, we're talking about the origin of eukaryotes, remembering that we had these ancient prokaryotes and they've absorbed some of the other more useful prokaryotes. So they might have absorbed something that can undergo cellular respiration, and they've absorbed them and using them as their mitochondria. Now, once they've developed that, they can then also absorb photosynthetic prokaryotes or bacteria, and then they can utilize them as well. So you'll note that things with chloroplasts in them also have the mitochondria. Now, oxygen in the atmosphere is, now, that many million years ago, there was 0% oxygen, okay? Nothing in the atmosphere, nothing that can be breathed as oxygen gas. However, when those photosynthetic organisms start to pop up, you start to get more and more. So you might be talking about photosynthetic prokaryotes that may have pushed that to 2%. And then once they start becoming a bit more prominent in the eukaryotes and start evolving, then we start getting huge numbers. We're up to 20% oxygen in our atmosphere now. So the photosynthetic organisms are creating that oxygen and absorbing the carbon dioxide, so they're drastically changing the contents of the atmosphere. Okay, we know we still have carbon dioxide in the air right now and other gases as well. So carbon dioxide and methane are two of those that are in the atmosphere right now, and they are greenhouse gases. They trap heat. So if we start pushing the amount of oxygen up, comparatively or relatively speaking, the amount of methane and carbon dioxide go down. And what that means is we have less of these gases that warm the earth, and we start getting cooling of the earth, ice age style. Now, also if we increase the oxygen in the atmosphere, we start increasing the dissolved oxygen in the water, in the oceans, and what we start to see is it oxidizes iron deposits in the deep ocean there. So we get banded iron formations that look a bit like this, and they can be used to make steel now if we mine them. Right, chemical processes of photosynthesis. Number 1, it is an active process. It does actually require a little bit of ATP, and that's why having those mitochondria in the cells also really important. Now, the reaction requires energy to form bonds, so it's actually endothermic. It takes energy in from the outside environment. Now, to fill the gap where it can't get any other kind of energy, it uses light energy. When we are talking about getting small molecules and making a big molecule, such as glucose, then we start to need energy, and that the energy deficit is filled by light energy. Now, light plays an important role in so many parts of this. Light, number 1, is taken in by chlorophyll and used to produce the glucose. However, light is also used to split water molecules, and it splits water molecules or degrades them, or lysis, so photolysis, photo meaning the photons of light and lysis meaning it's degrading it. The photolysis happens when we're breaking the H2O molecules into electrons, hydrogen atoms and oxygen. This is straight out of BioNinja. It's a really good description of what's going on here. So once we get that light energy, a light-dependent reaction can occur. The light splits those water molecules into the hydrogen and the oxygen can straight away diffuse out of the cell. That's what we want from the plants. The light energy also goes into the chlorophyll, and this is the really big section that's going to be quite complex and create the glucose or the carbon compounds that we need. So once this oxygen is created, it just goes out, okay? But the hydrogen can then be used once more energy is created to go down into this further complex situation. This is where the carbon dioxide comes in. Remember, it's water plus carbon dioxide. So the carbon dioxide is coming in and it is used with the energy to create the organic compounds or the glucose in our regard. So again, very complex situation. The Calvin cycle is that light-independent reaction, so that can happen at night, but the light-dependent reaction obviously needs to happen when there is light available to it to do that photolysis and to be absorbed into the chlorophyll. All right, there's a lot of factors that affect photosynthesis in the same way that any reaction has things that affect it, but the factor that is furthest away from being ideal will be the limiting factor. Okay, number one, temperature. We know that temperature affects enzymes and enzymes control these processes as well. Enzymes control so many processes in metabolism, so they are temperature sensitive. So if they're not in that Goldilocks zone, there's probably going to be issues. Light intensity. The increase in light we get, the more that light-dependent reaction can occur. But also we know that we have a light-independent reaction. And so we can get to a point, but then we plateau out. Okay, the rate of photosynthesis will slow down and then just stay the same because that light-independent reaction needs to happen as well. Now, CO2 concentration, we know we need carbon dioxide to get in to do that light-independent reaction. So once again, it's going to plateau out the rate of photosynthesis because it depends on both the light-dependent and the light-independent. All right, the electromagnetic spectrum is something we need to talk about because a limiting factor is the type of light energy that the organism can absorb. You might have seen this before, and it's really important for us to understand that visible light is the only energy that our chloroplasts can use there. So visible light appears between 400 and 700 nanometers in wavelength, and we're looking at really high frequency wavelengths here to really long ones. A wavelength being this point to this point, that is the wavelength, the length of the wave. So white light is what we see usually, and it's a mixture of all those colors. Think the Pink Floyd prism, the white light comes in and lots of different colors come out. Things that are appearing red are actually reflecting red light back into our eyes. They're absorbing all the other colors and reflecting red light back. So that's why things like chlorophyll appear green, because they are absorbing other colors and reflecting green back at us. Chlorophyll best absorbs blue and red light. It's reflecting the green back, doesn't take it in, but it does like the other ones. Now this is the higher energy area, the high energy because it's got a smaller wavelength, so really high energy like this as opposed to slower and a bit bigger. The red energy is sort of at a higher wavelength but lower energy, and it goes into the infrared part of the spectrum or heat energy, and the blues and the violets are up that end, so higher energy as well. Right, we need to be able to draw absorption spectrums. And an absorption spectrum is the light waves that are absorbed by the photosynthetic pigment. Now, if we have a look at this, there's actually multiple kinds of chlorophyll or pigments that are in any given leaf. So if we look here, we've got chlorophyll A, chlorophyll B, and carotenoids. Carotenoids, have a look at that. They seem to work really well off the blue end of the spectrum, but they don't reappear again at the red end of the spectrum. Chlorophyll A and B, however, quite like the blue light and then come back again to do a little bit of the red light. We can separate out these kinds of chlorophylls using a process called chromatography, and that's one of our mandatory pracs that we need to do. All right, we're going from absorption spectrum, what kind of light it absorbs, to an action spectrum, and we need to be able to draw one of these as well. An action spectrum shows the rate of photosynthesis at any given wavelength of light. So there's that picture again. We're loving the reds, we're loving the blues, not so much here because they're the colours that are being reflected back. All right, quite a lot in there. Make sure you take the time to write your notes and read through your syllabus dot points, please.